What's going on, everyone? Welcome to part two of how to dominate this upcoming January textbook season. No matter when you're watching this video, it's still going to be relevant because of the fact that there's always two textbook seasons throughout the year. So, no matter what day it is, there's still an upcoming textbook season for you to be buying books. In the last video, we showed you a bunch of awesome textbooks that we found on BookMine without very much effort at all. We even went through a 5-step checklist for the 5 things you should be thinking about when you're buying textbooks. In this video specifically, we're going to be talking about the frequently asked questions, questions that people always ask us, like, when should I start buying textbooks? Things like, well, how many copies should I buy? Well, what happens if Amazon's in stock? All those good questions. Before we get into it, what's going on, Victor?
Hey, Joji. The first video was awesome. So if you haven't watched it, make sure you go check that out. And now we're going to go over a little bit more of the questions you guys might have of those posts that we had, the college textbooks. And now we're just going to go into some of those frequently asked questions. So yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Now, we did forget to mention in the previous video that we actually did make a checklist here that you can access through the Google link drive below or the Google Drive link down below. And this is just a checklist so that you can have it by your side as you're doing your sourcing on BookMine, or even if you're not using BookMine, you can use it to do your sourcing. And as with training wheels on a bicycle, Victor,
Yeah.
eventually you get rid of the training wheels. This is just to help you with the repetitions. It's helpful with the reminders. And you will get to a point, Victor, after looking at a number of keepographs where you don't even need this anymore because it'll just be hardwired in your brain. But that's, accessible
But
to you.
it's here then. Yeah. Print this out and then make sure you check each one of these. Okay. Did the sales rank drop? Check.
Yeah.
Did the use price go up? Check. And so if you get 5 checks, that's a book you should probably go and buy. Right. And so that's something you should probably print and put that next to your computer.
Absolutely. Now, on the same document is going to be the common questions that we're going to ask. And so these are the 10 questions we're going to be talking about or answering here. But
Yeah.
before we do that, I want to address this quote, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, Victor. The second best time is now. What the heck does that mean?
So that quote means like we all wished we could go back to the past and actually do like a successful thing beforehand, but it's today, right? So like 20 years ago, Amazon was awesome, right? 10 years ago, Amazon was awesome. 5 years ago, Amazon was awesome. But too bad guys didn't actually start your Amazon account then. But today is the second best time because 5 years from now, we're going to wish we started it today. So it's a great opportunity. It's still a great opportunity. And you can still make some really good money selling books on Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions we get all the time, Victor, is like, okay, I'm starting to buy textbooks. Are there any textbooks I should just know right off the bat that I should just completely avoid? And so I think the first thing that we should talk about are going to be books that maybe, have the year in them. Like you'll often find textbooks, specifically like nursing textbooks, often have this where the publication or the date where the information is necessary is in the actual title and on the cover of the book. So if it says like 2024, ICD 2023, like there's always a new edition every year. You are going to want to avoid those books for sure.
Yeah, anything that says the year in it, like taxes 2024, and then you're trying to buy the book for next year, 2025, that's not a good book to buy because
And
the tax law is always changing. And if
right.
you're referencing the old stuff, you're not going to do your taxes well. So that book really falls in value. And that's why we're saying don't buy books that have a year in the title.
Yep, absolutely. Or another thing to think about as well is case law books. There's
Mm.
a lot of American case series books. They're kind of stereotypically like this red cover. They're usually law books, books about the Constitution. And when those books come out with new editions, the old editions can tank in price, unlike a lot of other books. For a lot of books, when a new edition comes out, it does take a little time for that older edition to kind of erode in price and no longer become profitable to flip. But the case law books, Victor, right? Those books can often just absolutely tank in price.
Right, right, exactly. And so the law books also change. The laws change quite often. And so because of that, if a new edition comes out, the old edition really tanks. Like you said, Joji, some of these books can go from like $200 down to like 50. And
Yeah.
now we're really sinking here. And let's go to the next point here. I think getting books that don't have much demand at all. So let's just say a book that has steady supply. Basically, there's been 10 sellers on this listing for the last year and nobody has bought this book for say $7. It's been $7 all year long. There's been ten sellers on it. Nobody's buying it. There's no sales rate drops. That's a book I wouldn't be buying,
Yeah.
and neither should you, right? That's a book that's dead because if you buy the book, then now you're sitting with the rest of the 10 people never selling your book. So that's another book you should avoid.
Absolutely. Next point we're gonna talk about, frequently asked questions. How do we stay safe from counterfeit textbooks? So Joji, Victor, I hear a lot in all the Facebook groups that you shouldn't be selling textbooks. They're very, very risky. They're very likely to be counterfeited. What are some of the things that I can do to make sure that our account stays safe? So the first resource that we would say you should use is the Books Run Counterfeit Risk Checker. You can simply put an ISBN number in or an ASIN number, and it will go and tell you the likelihood of that book being counterfeit. So, for example, let's say we put it in this book, you can see that it does say it's highly likely to be counterfeit. In other words, don't buy that book,
Yeah,
Victor,
don't
right?
buy the book.
Common sense. Right. If it says even likely, don't buy it. You only want to be buying books that say unlikely. It just means that Books Run hasn't found much evidence that that book, has had many issues of being counterfeit. Again, doesn't mean that it isn't. It just means that if you follow this, it's a good rule of thumb. Just like Victor, wearing a seatbelt, while it's not
Yeah,
100% guaranteed to save your life, it is going to save your life more often than not. And that's why
most of
you
the
wear a
time.
seatbelt, right?
Exactly.
Now, the next thing here is to make sure you buy the book on Amazon. Why is it so important for the safety of your account, Victor, that you buy the book on Amazon specifically?
So the reason why is because let's just say you bought a book and then a customer comes back and complains and wants a return or says that the book is counterfeit, right? Just automatically says, hey, that for some reason they believe that the book is counterfeit. Amazon will then come back to your account and come back to you and ask you, you need to prove that this book is actually not a counterfeit book. And all you have to do if you bought it on Amazon is go back to the Amazon invoice, give them the ID number, paste it into their chat and basically submit it to them, and within hours you'll have your account restored and the counterfeit complaint will be taken off your account and you'll have it back to normal. And so that's really important because you don't want to get your account suspended, and that's one of the best ways to make sure that your account is healthy.
No, absolutely. Now, to go with that point a little bit further on BookMine, we do have a filter called safe and not a safe. And simply, if you just click on the safe button, what this will do is get rid of some of the publishers that are represented by, law firms that do come after people's accounts that sell very, very popular textbooks. And so some people out there are I shouldn't say overly cautious, but there's some people out there who want to be that cautious and want to avoid like Pearson and McGraw-Hill and Cengage. And so one click of the button will essentially eliminate any of the books that we brought up that come from those publishers. So just another layer of security for you.
Yeah, because we're trying to keep your account safe. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Third question. What happens if there's a new edition for the textbook that I'm buying? Should I just absolutely avoid it? And, the book that I'm looking at is a dead book? Not quite. This is probably one of the harder points for people to understand. It really depends on the book. And let's make this simple. If the book you're looking at that you wanna buy does have a newer edition. Look at that newer edition, look at its keeper graph. Is it still holding a high price? And if it's still holding a high price, that's a great sign that the older edition is probably still gonna do well. If the newer edition you're looking at is already starting to tank and come down in price, it's probably less likely that the older edition is gonna do well. Not only that, look at the how long that newer edition has been out. If that newer edition, Victor, has already been out like 1,000 days, like it's already been out 3 years, and you're like, "Wait, hold on a second. This book I wanna buy, it did well last textbook season, and the one before that, and the one before that." Well, this new edition has been out already, while this
Yeah.
one has still done well and has been selling. So, there's a little bit of nuance here. It's just kinda using your common sense. But essentially, if there is a new edition, just do a little more research and decide whether or not you think that the book you're looking at is still gonna perform well or not.
Yeah, I think some key takeaways here is if there's a new edition and it's like the new edition's 6 months or less old, then probably stay away from the old edition because you don't know necessarily how the new edition is going to affect the old edition.
Right.
But if
Yep.
the new edition's well over a couple of years old, like you said, Joji, 1,000 days old or something,
Yep.
and the old edition is still performing well, yeah,
Yeah.
then you're doing well because any effect has already happened
Yep.
to the old edition. So that's something you can depend on. And yeah,
Yeah, and if you wanna go a little bit further, you could always go back to the previous editions, the older editions. Like, for example, the edition we wanna buy has a newer edition, but it also likely had an edition previous to it. Look at that edition previous to it and see, well, how did its price change when the edition you're now looking at came out? And I know everyone's like, "Well, we're in the matrix because 'cause we're talking about this edition, that," and it gets really complicated. It's really not that complicated. Just use your common sense, make your best educated guess. And remember, you're gonna make some mistakes in the process, but the margins on books are so great that even if you make some mistakes, you're still likely going to come out ahead on a lot of them, even on a lot of the books that you'll probably down the road go, "Why did I buy that book?" But, like we always say, do your due diligence, do the best that you can. You'll make some mistakes, but as long as you learn from mistakes, it's all good.
And the margin's so high that you can make mistakes, right? So let's go to the next one.
Yeah. Question number 4, should I only buy books directly on Amazon? Or should I buy them on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp? Well, I think the answer is pretty simple. The safest way is where?
Buy them on Amazon. I know some people are like, "Oh, but I can save 10 cents on buying it on so and so website or something," and I'm like, "Okay, do you know the return policies? Do you know are you sure you're gonna get the book back? Like, are you sure that this is a reputable seller?" These are not things that you're gonna have to worry about on Amazon that you're gonna have to worry about on these other websites. On top of that, if Amazon ever comes back and asks you whether or not the book is to prove that it's not a counterfeit book, you're not gonna have that. Amazon's not gonna listen to an invoice or a receipt from eBay or for any other website besides their own. And so that's why we really recommend you to kind of stay and make sure you source on Amazon.
Yeah. And, also that would go for IP complaints. If you get an IP
Same
complaint,
thing.
counterfeit claim, again, just your Amazon order ID for that book. If you buy on Amazon, you're covered. If you didn't buy it on Amazon, but you bought it on eBay, so you could save 35 cents, then all of a sudden, it's less risky. And, people will ask, well, Joji Fisher, you do have eBay links on BookMine, so are you saying we should buy on eBay? Well, again, there's some nuance here, right? Like if you're buying multiple copies of the book, well, as long as you have bought at least a one or a couple of them on Amazon, then you always will have an invoice, right? Because it's the
Right.
same books. And so, let's say you sold 10 copies of one book and you get one counterfeit claim on it. Well, if you bought five of them on Amazon and five of them on eBay, well, you just give them an order ID from Amazon. So, if you're
Exactly.
going to buy on eBay, then at least have bought one book on Amazon. Have your
Yeah.
bases covered, kind of a thing.
Good point.
Now, this is a good question. How many copies should I buy?
Mm,
General rule of thumb is if you can count the number of sales rank drops, like very easily in that textbook season, buy one copy.
yeah.
If you cannot, count the number of sales rank drops, then there's opportunity to obviously buy more copies. And if it's so, so, so low where you can't even there's no distinction at all between drops, it's almost just like a bowl. Like
It's
what's
like
it
a
like a
clump.
bowl?
Yeah. A clump of just green to green. Yeah.
It's
Yes.
just like a bowl, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Then what we know is you can buy multiple copies, 3, 5, 7, 10. And again, it's gonna come down to how low does the sales rank get? How long does it stay there? But experience is the number one educator,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah, good point, Joji. If you wanna be conservative, only buy 1, right, of any of the books that you're looking at, but if you'll soon will get to, understanding that the higher in demand books, you can buy, like you're saying, 5 to 10 copies of it and still be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this isn't another question yet, but I think this brought up a great point, which was just because I think I could sell 10 copies, does that mean I should buy 10 copies? And
Mm,
it all comes down to where you're at with your capital. And
yeah,
we always usually try to say go wide rather than deep, especially in the first year or the first textbook cycle that you've ever been in. We would highly recommend just try to buy as many individual titles as you can and buy maybe one, maybe two copies of each and send all those in, have a wide range of different books because you'll learn a lot from that. And then later on, you can go more deep on books. But what we're saying is if you only have like a couple $1,000s to spend, don't spend like $1,000 on just one book because it's just so much more risky than spreading it out and diversifying into other books.
yeah, spread your risk out. Similar to us, both me and Joji, we invest into the S&P 500, which is the top 500 companies instead of just going in and going all in on Amazon or something like that, or Amazon, right? We decide all 500 companies is what we wanna do instead of just one. It's the same type of, mentality here, it's the same type of thought process. We wanna spread out our risk, and that's why you don't wanna go all in on just one book.
Absolutely. Next question is when is the best time to sell textbooks? And this is just going to be when you can look at a keeper graph and you can look at when the sales rank goes low, when you see that bowl shape, like
Yeah.
at the bottom of the bowl, right? Like if you put a ball in a bowl, like where the ball rests, like in the center of the bowl,
You go exactly where we're just kinda like, okay, right there. Yeah,
and that's what you want to sell.
exactly.
Right? And that's when the demand is the absolute highest. It's through the roof. And that's when the book is going to sell. As you get towards the end of the textbook season, like in specifically, if we talk about January, getting the third and fourth week of January, that's when sales are starting to slow down. That's when you should probably think about pricing down lower or maybe holding on for the next year. Anything else you want to add there?
No, no, you're right. I mean, you covered it great, especially the when should I price the book lower, right?
Mhm.
If you have a lot of copies and we're already at edging to the end of the season, that's something you should start really thinking about
Right.
pricing the book lower.
Yep, absolutely. Now, going along with that, people always ask, well, great, Joji and Victor, I bought all these books, nothing's selling yet. Like, I did also just talk to a good friend of mine who is recently getting into flipping textbooks. And she's like, I'm buying all these books, but nothing's selling. So I asked her, like, when are you trying to sell these books? Like, what are you buying? She said, oh, I'm buying books for the January textbook season. I said, well, is it January textbook season yet? She's like, that's what it
Mm.
is. It's not janitor. That's just human. I mean, it's really simple, right? But it kind of defies human logic where you're like, I'm spending all this money, I'm buying all these books, and you're like, but nothing's selling. And that's because, well, you're buying it to sell at a specific time in the future, and that time hasn't come yet. Right. So all that means is, yes, you're doing the right thing if you're buying textbooks before the season and they're not selling yet because they're going to sell during the textbook season. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. They sell during the season. And
Yep.
so if you're selling a bunch of like snowmobile books, right, aren't going to start selling until it starts snowing. And
Yeah,
so if you're
exactly.
thinking in May you're going to get some sales, you're just not. You're not going to get them until it's actually snowing outside. And that's when you're going to sell that type of book.
Yeah. Yep. Another question we get asked all the time is, what the heck should I price this book at? I see the buy box was at 90. I see the lowest price was at 40, then it was 50, then it was 60. And then where do I price it? Do I price it, if I do have a min and a max price with my repricer, do I have a small one? Do I have a large one? Do I shoot for the moon? Like how high or how low do I go? So you want to give us a little bit of thoughts there.
Yeah, I think we've covered it before in the past, but basically what we're trying to do is capture like the midpoint, like
Yeah.
where the book has sold consistently
Yep.
throughout that season, and that's probably the best point you want to sell the book at. That's where probably what you put your min price, and then your max price, probably the highest point that it sold for, like that last season. So the middle would be the midpoint, and then the max price would be the highest price it's ever sold for in that season, and then list it like that, and just stick the min and max price in there and let your repricer go out, have fun,
Yep.
basically.
One thing to make sure is that the min price should be profitable. And
Yeah,
that's a good thing
totally.
about doing that is that if you have a min and a max price and the book sells anywhere in that range, you're going to be profitable and that's all good. So all that means is when you're buying the book, you should have sort of a little bit of that safety net built in where it's like, okay, at the min price of, $45 or whatever it is, I'm still going to be profitable and it's still going to be a good book. Another great question. Joji, Victor, should I price for the prime bump or the prime gap? So the prime bump is the difference in price between whatever the cheapest option is, which is usually from a merchant fulfilled seller, and then usually the buy box price, which is an FBA seller. Not all the times, but usually it's an FBA seller. So
Yeah, right.
should I price for the prime bump? And if so, how much or how little? Well, again, always just look at past research. Like you can go back 3 years now and look at the previous, January and August textbook seasons and see, well, where did the buy box go? Was the buy box right in line with the lowest price? In other words, was there no prime bump? Was it way higher, meaning there's a large prime bump? So again, you're just making decisions based upon what you've seen in the past. And so let's say you go back 2 or 3 textbook seasons, Victor, and you're like, wow, for this particular book, the used price is always at 50 and then the buy box is at 75.
Yeah,
Well, then you should probably price it at 75 because that's
right.
what it seems like the prime bump has been. And, on the other hand, if it's like used price gets to 45 and the buy box is at 47, well, I guess there's not really much of a prime
Not
bump for
much
that
there.
book.
Right, and so, like you're saying basically saying, Joji,
Yep,
is lean on historic data, right?
yep,
Just go back 2 years and see where the price is versus the prime bump, and if you see there's enough spread in those 2 years, then you know you can depend on that, and if you don't, if you see them real close to each other, the used price and the prime bump, well, then there's not really much of a price, a prime bump there, and just basically price it as is.
yep. All right, I think that's good. Last question was, how can I get started? All you have to do is go to bookmine.co, sign up for a free 10-day trial, and you can start sourcing right now, which happens to be the best time to start sourcing college textbooks, especially if you're new to this, because you've got, up until at least December 15th to be buying books, sending them in, getting them checked in and selling them in the January textbook season. And again, don't worry if it's past that time, meaning like you see this video even 3 years into the future.
Yeah,
This video is going to be relevant for years to come because no matter what day it is, Victor,
yeah.
there'll always be an upcoming season. Because guess what, Victor? After January textbook season's over, what are we looking forward to?
Oh, it's probably August. That's probably gonna be an August textbook season.
January for
Oh, Joji,
August.
you know how many books are on BookMine right now? 4,500 books that you can source right now, and so this is going to be throughout the year that BookMine finds that type of amount of books.
Yep.
So at any time you could be sourcing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope you enjoyed this video and make sure you check out the links down below in the description if you want access to that 5-step checklist. We'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.
See you there.